Imagine a man named Job, living in the land of Uz. He was a man of unwavering integrity, deeply devoted to God, and abhorred evil. He was blessed with a large family, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and immense wealth, owning thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, along with countless servants. Job was, in fact, the most prominent figure in all the East. His sons often held feasts in their homes, always including their sisters in the festivities. After each gathering, Job would rise early and offer sacrifices for each of his children, concerned that they might have unknowingly sinned or harbored ill thoughts towards God. He maintained this ritual constantly, diligently seeking to keep his family pure before the Almighty. Before we dive into this captivating story of faith and perseverance, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more inspiring content your way. Now, let's explore the remarkable tale of Job. One day, when the angels gathered before the Eternal, Satan, the accuser, appeared among them. The Eternal inquired, "Where have you been, Satan?" Satan replied, "I've been roaming the earth, observing all that transpires." The Lord then challenged him, "Have you noticed my servant Job? There's no one like him, so honest, true to his word, completely devoted to me, and a hater of evil." Satan scoffed, "You think Job is good out of pure goodness? No one is that. Selfless, you protect him, care for his family and his wealth, and bless everything he does. Of course he'd be faithful, but what if you took everything away from him? I guarantee he'd curse you to your face." The Lord responded, "Very well then, you may do as you wish with all he possesses, but you must not harm him personally." So Satan departed from the Lord's presence. Not long after, as Job's sons celebrated, at their eldest brother's house, a messenger rushed to Job with terrible news. "The Sabaeans attacked while your oxen were plowing and your donkeys were grazing. They stole the animals and slaughtered all the workers. I alone escaped to tell you." Before he finished, another messenger arrived, crying, "Lightning struck your sheep and shepherds, consuming them entirely. I alone survived." As if that weren't enough, a third messenger burst in. "3 bands of Chaldeans raided your camels and massacred your laborers. I alone am left." While he was still speaking, a 4th messenger arrived with the most devastating news of all. "Your sons and daughters were feasting at their eldest brother's house when a mighty hurricane swept in from the desert, demolishing the house and killing all your children. I alone survived." Job rose, tearing his robes and shaving his head. In grief, he fell to the ground in worship, proclaiming, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return to the dust. The Eternal gives, and the Eternal takes away. May the name of God be praised forever." Despite such immense misfortune, Job neither sinned nor blamed God. Another day, when the angels again presented themselves before the Eternal, Satan was also there. The Eternal asked, "Where have you been, Satan?" Satan replied, "I've been traversing the earth, seeing how things are." The Eternal then said, "There is no one like Job. He's honest, true to his word, completely devoted to God, and hates evil. He's so upright, you even tried to destroy him, but it didn't work." Satan retorted, "A man will do anything to save his own life. What if you took his health? He would surely curse you to your face." The Eternal replied, "Very well then, you can do whatever you want to him, but you must not take his life." Satan left the Eternal's presence and afflicted Job with a terrible disease, covering him with painful sores from head to toe. The itching and agony were so severe that Job took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself as he sat in the ashes. His wife, distraught, urged him, "Are you still clinging to your integrity? Curse God and just end it." But Job replied, "You speak like a foolish woman. We accept good things from God. Why should we not accept misfortune as well?" In all of this, Job did not sin. When Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard of his suffering, they left their homes to comfort and console him. Upon seeing him, they barely recognized their friend. They wept aloud, tore their robes, and threw dust on their heads in their anguish. Then they sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, without saying a word, for they saw how immense his suffering was. Finally, Job broke his silence and cried out, cursing the day he was born. He longed for death, wishing he had never seen the light of day. He lamented the pain and bitterness that consumed him, questioning why God allowed him to live in such agony. He yearned for peace, for release from his endless suffering, and wondered why he had not died at birth. He spoke of how in death the wicked cease troubling, and the weary find rest. Prisoners are freed, and the rich and poor, slave and free, are all equal. He questioned God's purpose in allowing the wretched to live when they desperately desired death. Eliphaz the Temanite was the first to respond. He acknowledged Job's past wisdom and encouragement to others, but rebuked him for his current despair. He suggested that true righteousness would not lead to such misfortune, and implied that Job's suffering must be a consequence of some hidden sin. He spoke of a secret revelation, a whispered word from a spirit, questioning how a mortal could be more righteous than God, who doesn't even fully trust his angels. He urged Job to seek God's mercy, emphasizing God's greatness and power to deliver the humble and thwart the wicked. He declared that those whom God corrects are blessed, for he wounds but also heals, delivers from disaster, and protects from evil. He promised Job prosperity, a flourishing family, and a long life, if he would. But listen and follow his advice. Job replied that his suffering was immeasurable, heavier than all the sand of the sea. He felt like a beast led to slaughter, pierced by the Almighty's arrows and poisoned by his wrath. He compared himself to donkeys and cows braying from hunger, explaining that his anguish made him lose his appetite. He yearned for God to crush him and end his life, finding satisfaction in not blaspheming before his limits were reached. He questioned where his strength and future lay, denying he was as strong as stone or iron. He lamented that his friends, like dried-up desert streams, offered no true support, only cringing in fear at his plight. He insisted he hadn't asked for money or sacrifice, urging them to show him something indisputable and speak the truth, even if it hurt. He accused them of treating people as objects and friends as commodities, challenging their judgment and defending his integrity. He then reflected on the hardship of life, likening it to slavery and the anxious wait of workers for the end of the day. He described his sleepless nights of anguish, his body covered in sores and worms, and his days passing swiftly and hopelessly. He pleaded with God not to forget that he was but a breath, his eyes having seen goodness for the last time. He compared himself to a cloud that vanishes, fearing that he would never return from the grave. He declared his intention to speak out his bitter but honest complaint against heaven, even if it meant further torment. He questioned God's constant scrutiny, asking why he was targeted and if his sins truly affected the Almighty. He begged for forgiveness or an end to his life, sensing his imminent death. Bildad the Shuhite then spoke, accusing Job of talking nonsense and implying that God does not make mistakes. He suggested that Job's children must have sinned to receive such punishment. He urged Job to kneel before the Almighty, promising restoration if Job was truly innocent and righteous. He encouraged Job to learn from their ancestors' wisdom, comparing fleeting human life to plants that wither without sustenance, much like those who forget God. He asserted that God cannot reject the good and will restore Job's joy, while his enemies will face trouble. Job replied that he knew all this, but the core question remained: how could a mere mortal truly be righteous in God's eyes? He acknowledged God's immense wisdom and power, how he shakes mountains, controls the sun and stars, and performs countless miracles. He felt that God's presence was silent yet real, and that no one could stop him or question his actions. He despaired of arguing his case, believing that even if innocent, he would only incriminate himself further. He saw no difference between good and evil being destroyed by God, who remained insensitive to the despair of the innocent while allowing the wicked to flourish. He lamented his short, joyless life, slipping away like a swift ship, his misfortunes eating away at him despite his attempts to smile. He felt already declared guilty, with no relief or peace in sight, and wished for an arbitrator to mediate between him and God, to free him from terror so he could speak boldly. He declared he could no longer bear his life, pouring out every complaint and bitterness of his soul. He prayed for God to declare the charge against him, questioning why God tormented him after creating him, and whether God saw as mortals did or was limited by time. He pleaded for God to cease searching for his guilt, reminding him that he knew Job was innocent and that no one could help him. He recalled his formation from clay, lamenting that God would now break him. He described the miracle of his conception and life, questioning why God now relentlessly pursued him with new witnesses and increasing anger. He wished he had never been born, asking for a moment's respite before his inevitable death and burial. In the darkness of the grave, Zophar the Naamathite then spoke, rebuking Job for his multitude of words and uncalled for speech. He accused Job of trivializing spiritual matters and speaking nonsense, claiming Job's words betrayed his guilt. He sarcastically asked if Job was born before the mountains or knew everything, implying that Job lacked the wisdom of his friends, who were older and closer to God's promises. He challenged Job to explain God's mysteries, stating that God was far higher and deeper than human comprehension. He warned that if God ordered Job arrested, no one could stop him, for God sees through lies and recognizes evil. He declared that only a foolish person would remain ignorant, urging Job to open his heart, ask God for help, and wash away his sin. If Job would do so, he would walk without shame or fear, forget his troubles, and enjoy security and hope, while the wicked would have no hope but certain death. Job then retorted that his friends spoke like experts, as if wisdom would die with them. He asserted that he knew all they knew and was not inferior. He declared his intention to present his case directly to the Almighty, accusing his friends of humiliating him with lies and being worthless charlatans who should simply keep quiet. He challenged them to consider his perspective, questioning why they lied in God's name and took sides with him, as if God needed their defense. He warned them that God would intervene if he found bias in their testimony, reminding them of God's splendor and their fear of lying before him. He dismissed their statements as empty wisdom, prepared to face any consequences for speaking his mind. He affirmed his trust in God even if he killed him, determined to defend his innocence to the end, confident that no wicked person would dare appear before God. He urged his friends to listen carefully to his defense, believing he would be acquitted. He then made two requests of God: to remove his afflictions and to speak directly to him so he could answer. He asked God to reveal the charges against him, questioning why God hid and treated him as an enemy, kicking him like an old tin can or a dead dog. He acknowledged that God had a long list of his youthful mistakes, chaining him and watching his every move. He mused on man's fragility, short life, and anguish, comparing it to a fading flower or a fleeting shadow. He questioned why God wasted time on such an insignificant being, dragging him to court and expecting anything from humanity. He lamented man's limited lifespan, wishing for a brief rest before death. He contrasted man's fate with that of a tree, which can sprout again even after being cut down, while man dies and never returns. He wished God would bury him and forget him for a while, setting a time to remember him again. He questioned if man dies, will he live again? He expressed his longing for deliverance, for God to call him, promising to answer. He hoped God would watch his every step but not count his errors, tying up his sins in a sack and casting them into the sea. Yet he despaired that just as mountains crumble and rocks shift, man's hope is reduced to dust. He concluded that God is too great for them, always having the last word, and that they must endure their own pain and suffering without knowing the fate of their children. And so, Job's ordeal continued, a testament to the depths of human suffering and the unwavering nature of faith. His friends, in their limited understanding, sought to explain his pain through earthly logic, while Job grappled with the unfathomable ways of the Almighty. But even in his darkest hour, Job held on to a glimmer of hope, a desperate longing for justice and understanding from the very God who seemed to have forsaken him. Just as the Bible concludes with a new heaven and a new earth, where tears are wiped away and all things are made new, so too would Job's story find its ultimate restoration. Though he endured unimaginable loss and suffering, God, in his boundless mercy, would ultimately vindicate his faithful servant. Job's afflictions would pass, his health would be restored, and his family and wealth would be doubled. His story stands as an eternal promise that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, God's steadfast love endures, and those who trust in him, even when they cannot understand, will ultimately witness his glorious triumph over all sorrow and despair. Like the final triumph over evil, sickness, and death described in Revelation, Job's end proclaims a future where all wrongs are righted, and the faithful are eternally blessed in the presence of the divine. Job's story challenges us deeply. It reminds us that sometimes life throws us curveballs, even when we feel we've done everything right. We might face loss, pain, or confusion, and those around us with good intentions might offer explanations that simply don't fit. But Job's unwavering commitment to God, even in his profound suffering, points to something powerful. It's not about understanding every why or getting a perfect explanation. It's about holding on to hope when everything else crumbles. So, for you, listening right now, what are you clinging to? What challenges are making you question everything? Perhaps it's time to shift your focus from what you've lost or what you don't understand to the unwavering truth of something greater than yourself. Just as the Bible promises a complete restoration, your journey too holds the potential for profound renewal. Will you dare to believe that even in the storm, there is a promise of peace and ultimate triumph?